Lasse Nielsen,
Yes.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
You are an expert in communication, and today's expert in crisis communication. So I would imagine you've been a lot in front of a camera in your career, but this time it's a lot less stressful circumstances, so you can just totally relax.
Yeah.
We're just gonna pick your brain about your experience.
Well, I'm used to being in front of the camera and defending the company that I work for and everything that we did wrong and everything that the customers are not happy about. So this is a very different setting for me, but it's also a nice setting to be in. Have some time to elaborate on some of these topics.
Yeah, it should be a walk in the park for you. So looking forward to it. Why don't you give us an introduction to who you are and your background?
Yeah, so my name is Lasse. I am a senior advisor at favours, one of Norway's largest communications and public affairs agencies. So I have quite an extensive experience dealing with issues management and crisis management, crisis communications. Partly because I have more than 10 years experience as SVP of communications with the airline Norwegian, where I was responsible for media relations, international PR, crisis comms, sustainability. Prior to joining Norwegian, I was with TV2, which is Norway's largest broadcaster, their online section, for about four and a half years, managing editor for TV2.no. And I also have experience working for a media monitoring and media analysis company. And my education is communications, writing, journalism from the US. So that's briefly my experience in one minute.
Awesome. Sounds like I have the right guy. You don't have to answer this question, but do you have any juicy? What was the most stressful situation you've been in with crisis communication? If you can answer that on top of your head.
Most stressful, probably a pilot strike back in 2015, when you have to ground aircraft, you have to take care of passengers, and you have to make sure that you communicate efficiently to all your stakeholders at the same time, and also making sure that you take care of the internal aspects while a crisis is going on. And I think sort of what sort of defines those type of crises is that it's a crisis where the team that you're supposed to be one team, right? And then the team sort of splits up, and you become enemies in the public sphere instead of moving in the same direction. So I think for me that was it was quite a learning experience, but also challenging because you become quote unquote enemies with your colleagues. Another aspect of that crisis was that it lasted for 11 days. So it was, it was a pretty heavy workload when you also have the media spotlight on you 24/7 for more than 10 days. So the cybersecurity thing, I just want to mention two examples briefly. We actually had at Norwegian a competitor breaking into our booking system. So we've been, so we were, and they were fined by the Supreme Court of Norway, and also a couple of years ago, the police security service broke in. They didn't not necessarily break into the system, but they got illegal access to passenger information, and the conclusion was that the surveillance authorities said that it was. That they were breaking the law. They didn't have the right to ask the company's customer service to get access to sensitive data, passenger information. It was a breach of GDPR. So, a couple of examples there.
Well, wow, I'm 100% sure I have the right guy now. The background behind this episode is that I can't really explain the background for this episode, but I will say that it was made aware to my attention that Mnemonic did not want to, Mnemonic does a lot of incident response, right? But the incident response we do is technical. So we can, do forensics and, help the customer figure out, what has happened or what is happening. But when it comes to communication, we leave that to the professionals like yourself and First House. And now, I was pondering why that is. I was thinking why, can't be so complex. Just go out there and be true, be honest. Honesty is the best policy. But if I look at, some of the recent examples, I have a couple here in front of me. Volue, Norwegian technology company, right? Awesome crisis communication, in my opinion. They had daily updates. They had, a bunch of their C-level on daily Zoom updates, video, telling about what's happening. I thought that was really, really great, really transparent. FireEye, one of the world's largest security companies. They had an incident where all their cyber tools were hacked by a threat actor. And my dad actually was the one that made me aware of that incident. He called me up and he said, "Did you do any business with FireEye?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. Why?" And he said, "Yeah, they go here." He sent me a bunch of articles, and he made me think that FireEye was done. I was very nervous on their behalf when that incident was going on, but they were also very transparent. Went out and looking back at the incident, it was them that uncovered a campaign that ended up helping lots of other companies around the world. So you have those examples where they're very transparent and things go well, right? Both of their stock prices went down, and both of them went way up once the incident was sort of over. So that was two good examples. Then you have the really bad ones where you never hear about them. They're just cover-ups, right? And I'm assuming there's lots of those. And then you have something in the middle where, it's made aware, maybe not intentionally, that there's been an incident, and they have a press conference, but all they say in the press conference is, "It's under investigation. We'll get back to you." And then it's kind of like, why are you even having a press conference if that's all you're going to say, So I'm just wondering, given your background in crisis communication, why doesn't every company just come out and just be honest? What is the? I'm sure there's a lot of cybersecurity people out there that want to just know why that is.
Generally, if you don't have anything to say but it's under investigation, I wouldn't advise inviting the press to a press briefing. It just makes you look stupid, and it makes it looks like you're hiding something. So
I totally agree.
I think most companies would think that of course I want to be honest if I can. Of course I want to be transparent, but if I can. And I think that that is obviously driven by the media, because you're judged and you're graded how you respond to the crisis, and not necessarily how the crisis occurred. And if you look at how the media portrays it, they tend to portray it as you have something to hide, you're not transparent. If you give that comment that you just referred to, it's currently under investigation. Yeah, but most of us know that it's not that simple, because most of the time there's a wide range of issues that you have to consider before you go on record. And I think one thing is, when did the incident occur, and how fast do you actually respond, and how fast do you believe that you have to respond? You have to ask yourself, do you have the full picture? If we're talking about ransom, for instance, will you jeopardize the organization by sharing any details? Will what you say be in breach of GDPR? Will it require a notice to the stock exchange? How will our share price be affected by any type of statement? And I'm not saying that you should not be truthful in fear of your share price being affected, but those are things that you have to consider, and these are the things that you need to discuss before you share any statements with the public. And I think and sometimes it takes time to get that full picture, and when you have hundreds of journalists calling you at the same time and they want an answer, you have to respond with that standard phrase, because concluding too fast may also create a new crisis. But I think that responding as fast as you can before the media starts telling stories about you that are not true, I think that's critical, to be very be fast with the statement. But if you don't have anything else to say, you shouldn't invite the media to a press briefing, because that press briefing will actually be your new crisis, because then you'll have stories about this CEO or this group of top management that had nothing to say. So you're going to be made a joke out of. So I would not recommend that. But it's complex. So you need to sort of consider the consequences of what you say, because you don't want to avoid a new crisis by saying something wrong, or even breaking the law by saying something that you shouldn't say.
Right. There's a lot of things to think about, your stock price, but then again, there's the internal part, right? So a lot of the things you just said was external. Like, what comes first? In your experience, when a crisis happens, is it okay, let's communicate internally first and then externally? How does that process work?
No, I think a lot of companies get caught up in the external issues. and forget about the internal, or the which is the mere foundation of the company. So I think it's a rule of thumb, if it's possible, and if you're not listed, obviously you have to notice the stock exchange first for any changes that may sort of affect your share price, but always start internally first if that's possible. The media dynamics today, how social media works, and how also traditional and not least online media works, and also the international news channels. There's this constant pressure from the media to get a response, and I think some comms people get too stressed out because the journalists are calling, and I think that sort of stress sort of translates into answering too fast. So I think that when shit hits the fan, you need to buy time. You need to take a deep breath and just let that phone go to voicemail, and take care of what needs to be taken care of the next half hour, and then deal with the external side once you get your head above water.
Oof. I do not want to be in that situation. I was just sort of
you seem like a calm guy.
Yeah, I am. My head's just running. I would just use mnemonic as an example, right? God forbid this should ever happen, but let's say something happened with mnemonic, something bad, right? Somebody hacks us or something. I know we have a communications team, which is a part of the marketing department, and then journalists. Let's say journalists are calling them, and they're not taking the phone because they're following advice or trying to get their head above water. But what if those journalists come to let's say I'm responsible for security and they come after me? I have nothing to do with comms, but I don't have any sort of training in how to deal with media, right? And so I would assume that most communications departments tell everybody, don't respond to the media. That's our responsibility. But have you ever seen any cases where the journalists sort of went around the communications department?
Of course. They do that. They all do that all the time. That's their favorite activity when something happens. Yeah. They don't want to talk to comms people because they know that we have a different approach.
Know how to handle themselves, right? Yeah.
It's not like we want to be gatekeepers, but we know that our colleagues that are not necessarily trained properly, they may say something that they shouldn't say, and they say something, and they may say something that's completely honest. They may say something that's completely true, but it may be also it's a great chance of those types of statements being taken out of context. And back to what I said earlier, if your response is not coordinated, and if you haven't thought that scenario through with what will happen if I say A, B, C, if you haven't gone through that exercise, the security expert may say something that will create a completely new crisis, and may also be breaking the law. So I know it sounds serious, but that's sort of why that's why you should have a system, and you should have procedures for dealing with those types of issues. The communications department doesn't do it just because they think it's fun to control everything, but it's a purpose. It's the communications people are there to protect the reputation of the business and the interest of the business. So I think it's crucial that all companies have good procedures in place, and not least when they're hit by the unexpected and a crisis occurs, that they have a good crisis set up, and they have procedures, they have manuals, and they have conducted exercises with different scenarios and done evaluations afterwards, to identify where they can improve. I think that's really crucial to responding to a crisis professionally and efficiently.
So I've been a part of some meetings here with some of my clients where we had some of our incident responders a part of that call, and they said they get called in, like I said before, lots of times to companies experiencing some sort of cyber incident, and they need technical help. But they always tell the customer, it'd be great if you did planning ahead of time, so it wouldn't be a crisis. We don't want to be here. We don't want this to be a crisis. So ransomware, for example, that doesn't need to be a crisis. That could be, that happens, you restore backup, and, some downtime. Maybe you tell your customers about it, but it shouldn't be a full-blown crisis. So my next question to you, what should companies, what are some of the things they can do to prepare for the inevitable crisis so that it doesn't become a crisis? What do you tell your customers?
They should, well, first of all, they should call First House. That's number one.
That's what I did. So,
yeah, that's great. No, I think preparations is crucial. Like I just said, I mean, if you prepare well and exercise regularly, I believe that potential crisis may even be discovered in that internal process, and in some instances you may even avoid the crisis. And I think that if your goal is to keep a reputation intact, good crisis management is definitely key. So what you're sort of different phases in planning or establishing good crisis communications setup. You should obviously map your risks. You should map what are the potential scenarios that you could potentially be a victim of. You should establish your routines and resources. Setting up the organizations, making sure that the right people are a part of the crisis organization and the right functions, and obviously every modern organization should have IT as a part of their crisis management team, and that's also part of the planning process. Establishing the procedures, making sure that you have the right tools in place. You need digital tools to share information internally. You need digital tools to share updates with the public, and then you also need obviously what we call enabling. You need to have exercises. You have to have frequent exercises, and then once you're done with your exercises or dealing with the crisis in real time or a real crisis, you have to start in the rebuilding process, which is sort of mapping out the new strategy and evaluate what went wrong and identify new initiatives to ensure that the mistakes that you made, because you will make mistakes. There's always room for improvement. That those are taken into consideration when you evaluate your crisis response plan. So I think preparation and exercise. Those are two key words for any organization, because if you're not, you become the victim of how poorly you could potentially deal with a crisis, because when the crisis is a fact and you don't have a setup, you don't have a plan, you freak out. You don't know what to do, and you may say something that you regret. You may not even have the right resources in place, and then you're stuck dealing with new crisis and another crisis and a third crisis on top of the two previous crises. So it's just not a really good or situation to be in, and it's definitely not a situation that I would recommend. So you need to plan and you need to exercise.
So it's I remember the PowerPoint slide they used. They said the bigger the preparation, the smaller the response, right?
Yeah.
The smaller the preparation, the bigger the response.
Yeah.
And nobody wants
Exactly.
to be in that position, right? But you just said two things: preparation and exercise. The preparation part. Who is usually I would assume sort of all the larger enterprises, the larger companies have a crisis management team, right? It's not something I've thought about very often, but what does a preparation look like before you get to the exercise? Who's involved?
I mean, it obviously, it depends on, the type of organization. It depends how, big it is. Is it just a company based in Norway? Is it an international company? Does it have, is it a customer facing company, or is it only a, business to business company? Or is it, an organization with, a small number of members? So it sort of depends on how big the company is and sort of what role the company plays. But I think, I mean, if you look at your company, then it's obviously the CEO, of course, needs to have a role, but he or she is not a part of the sort of the operational, crisis response organization. So you would start with sort of mobilizing the the key functions of the company, IT, operations, finance, maybe some from commercial, the sales side, and obviously communications. And then you would start talking about potential scenarios, identifying what could go wrong, and then sort of build the organization based on those types of scenarios. And then you will start working on a crisis communications plan, and also identify the roles that you're all supposed to have in the organization, because when crisis hits you, you need to be extremely structured. You have to have dedicated roles. So in the communications part, you need one to manage all the communications. You need one to be a spokesperson. You need one to be responsible for key messages. You need one to be responsible for publishing, and you need one to coordinate everything that happens cross-functionally. So everyone needs to have very specific tasks. And then what you do is, like, when you have those responsibilities and roles set up, you will get a task card. These are your tasks, and then you just go through a list and you check completed, and then you report back, and then you start working the next steps of the crisis. So everything needs to be done very, very systematically,
methodically.
Yeah.
I was thinking about my former employer, right? Speaking of exercises, they had this big truck. They called it the cyber truck, and I mean, like, it was like an 18-wheeler, huge truck, right? It took up the whole street. And what they would do is they drove that truck around this. It was in the States to start off, but they got it over to Europe somehow, and they drove from city to city, and they met some of the largest clients, right? And what they would do is they'd bring this was a security exercise, right? So they would bring in the head of security and some members of his team, but they would also bring in leadership, right? People that aren't usually a part of these things, like maybe the head of crisis communication, the CEO. And the whole point was to put them through a cyber incident for them to, I think that at the end of the day, it was for them to realize that, when a cyber incident occurs, you're going down your list of things to do and say to the media, and you realize, oh, wow, we don't know. Like, there's a cyber incident happening. If it's ransomware, it's one thing because nothing's working, right? But if you think somebody stole your patient data, but you don't really have the tools to say what they stole or how much they stole, GDPR says you have to go out and say, we don't know. You have to tell all your customers if you can't, be very specific about who was affected. How would you, as First House, recommend that a security team, for example, carry out these exercises?
If you already have a crisis organization set up and you have procedures in place, so if we assume that those things are taken care of, then you should exercise a scenario that is likely to happen within your organization, and then make sure that you that is obviously as realistic as possible, and it involves as much of the crisis organization as possible. And then you could set aside half a day, 3 to 4 hours, and then have external help, sort of playing the media and playing other stakeholders that criticize you and are furious, and then have a good evaluation process following that, and then see if there's and make sure that your learning points are taken into account when you revise your crisis manual. But exercise a likely scenario that your organization may be hit by. So I think that would be the first one, and then maybe the second one would be a scenario that may not be that likely. So that would also give you the ability to compare how did you respond to what's sort of more known to you than what's not as familiar to you. And is there something that you need to do in the more sort of unfamiliar territory to improve your response? But I think I'm sorry. But I would and if you're not used to exercises, if you haven't done exercises, I would start with a tabletop exercise, and then sort of that you do one day, and then maybe the following week you'll do a bigger scale, and then maybe the third week you'll do a full scale. But because if you haven't done any exercises and you start with a full scale, you're going to be it's going I think it's going to feel a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, right. I can see that. No, I was just sitting here thinking to myself, as a sales guy that I am, right? if I was the head of security, I would definitely be aligning these sort of exercises with whatever messaging or whatever I thought we were lacking, right? So something that highlights the need for example, that example I had earlier, if somebody stole my patient data, but I didn't have the logging, then I would definitely want to highlight that to them so that they would, oh, okay, you need it for that. All right, yeah. Tips to all the security people out there: use those exercises for your to get money.
Some organizations and some top management teams, they may think that, well, this is not for us. I mean, we can handle a crisis if it occurs, and a crisis it will not happen to us. And if that's the response that you get, and if that's sort of the attitude, I think it's going to require exactly what you just said. You need to be able to identify those risks and be very, very, very vocal about it. At the end of the day, that's the job, and it's sort of your responsibility to bring that to the table. So I think making sure that those scenarios and the potential consequences of them are understood by the ones who sort of decide on the budgets.
Sit on the money bag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know sometimes we in security we want to buy the newest and the fanciest without really thinking about the fact that that money needs to be spent, that can be spent on other things as well. So if it's not we don't need flashy things just to have flashy things. It should be a part of a larger picture. Yeah. So yeah, Mr. Nielsen, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's been great talking to you, and then realizing when we discuss it how important it is, and how important it is that all organizations prepare and exercise for future crisis, future scenarios. So it's been great. Thanks for having me, and it's been great talking to you.
Likewise. They can anybody listen to this podcast, if they are either trying to prepare for the inevitable incident or exercise, or can they even call you when the crisis is ongoing? Yes. I'm assuming.
Yes, that happens.
Just put your contact information here. Yeah.
Please do. Yeah. Well, yeah. See, that's what happens if you haven't prepared. Then we will get a call, and then we will, of course, be there, shortly, and try to sort of set the structure and start appropriate response. But we obviously we help with that too. But to your benefit, it should be earlier than when shit hits the fan.
Earlier.
Yeah.
Right. I totally agree. Mnemonic in first house together.
Yes.
That can't be stressful at all. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Nielsen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and we'll be talking soon.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Thank you.